Dan McClellan will literally lie to your face, and y'all will be like, well, he does have a degree after his name, so I'm going to trust him rather than some rando here on TikTok.
All right, let's see it. Prior to the Greco-Roman period, the Hebrew Bible has no concept of post-mortem divine reward or punishment.
The book of Job, which many scholars believe to be the earliest book written in the Hebrew Bible.
So any such scholars are going to be in the minority and are going to be overwhelmingly dogmatic or apologetic scholars. The majority of scholars agree that the book of Job probably came together in the exilic or more likely the Persian period, although it may be incorporating some tales from earlier generations. So this is coming right before the Greco-Roman period, and the meditating on the problem of evil that is so characteristic of the literature of the Persian period is what ultimately leads into the development of concepts of post-mortem divine reward and punishment.
Says this, it's Job speaking, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that he will stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh I will see God. Job believed in the resurrection, and he believed that God was his Redeemer, and Job believed that there would be reward for his righteousness, that he will be raised to life. Post-mortem award. So, Dan's lying to you.
So, a few concerns here. To begin, the notion that I'm lying means that I know what I'm sharing is not true, but I'm sharing it anyway. It means that I agree with this interpretation of Job 19:25 and 26. I know that's the true and the correct interpretation. Therefore, I know that a belief in the resurrection predated Greco-Roman period Judaism, and I'm just deceiving my audience just because. And obviously, that's not what's going on here. So the accusation that I'm lying is clearly just an attempt to lob the most incendiary claim you can, just because you're upset for some reason. Now, that brings up the very dogmatic interpretation of the very dogmatic translation of Job 19:25 and 26, which is notoriously unclear Hebrew. Here are those two passages in Hebrew. V'ani yadati go'ali chai, v'acharon al afar yakum. So what that literally says is, and I know my Goel, my kinsman redeemer, my redeemer, lives, and afterwards upon the dust he will rise. So this is not upon the earth, this is upon the dust, and most scholars think the dust here means the dust of either Job himself or the dust of humanity who come from the dust. So it's debated whether or not this is a reference to God or whether or not this is a reference to some human redeemer. A lot of scholars have pointed out Job thinks God is trying to kill him. Job is sure he's not getting any vindication from God, and so it doesn't seem likely to an awful lot of scholars that Job would trust that God will suddenly change their mind and become his redeemer once God has killed him. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of scholars. And there are other scholars who think that does make an awful lot of sense. But it's hotly debated. And so you can't really say, well, this is what it definitely is. These are passages where it's basically 50-50. It's a toss-up. Whatever you give preference to is almost certainly going to be because of rhetorical utility or dogmatism. We just don't know for sure what exactly the author of this passage, again, who's writing in the Persian period, was trying to get across. And that brings up an even more confusing passage, Job 19:26. V'achar ori nikfuzot umisari echazeh Eloah. So something's missing here. A lot of scholars agree that this text has been in some way corrupted. Something has been changed, something has been added, something has been taken away. Because literally it says, and after my skin, they will hack away or they will tear this. And zot is feminine. The antecedent isn't isn't skin, because that is a masculine noun. They will tear, they will hack this. What does that mean? We're not really sure. And then it says umivsari, This is a combination of a conjunction, the separable prefix min, which can mean from, out, away from, basar, which means flesh, and it is not a synonym for or. It doesn't mean skin. The flesh is actually what is underneath the skin. It is the meat. Think of the German word Fleisch. And then the first common singular pronominal suffix. And so what precisely this means is also hotly debated. I will see, and this is a verb that usually means envision. I will behold, I will envision, Eloah, the word for God. So from my flesh could mean from the perspective of my flesh. Some scholars have translated it from behind my flesh. Some scholars have understood the separable prefix min to be privative. So without my flesh, this is after the skin has been destroyed. So this is also hotly debated. And while some scholars have made stronger arguments than others, the notion that we can say, oh, it's definitely this one thing and it's definitely not the other things, is not a scholarly approach. That's just dogmatism. That's just, again, something based on rhetorical utility. You want it to mean that. And so you're just going to assert that it means that. And the reality is, again, we don't know for sure. However, what it is very unlikely to mean is a reference to a belief in the resurrection, because scholars are in pretty widespread agreement there was no concept of the resurrection yet during the Persian period, much less if we accept the notion that this is one of the first books of the Bible ever written, which it wasn't. This is a later text, but as late as it is, just before the Greco-Roman period, this is not evidence of a belief in the resurrection, at least according to the view of the majority of scholars. So there has been no case made really for the particular interpretation of these passages that this content creator is asserting. They're just nakedly asserting this is the correct interpretation and this is the correct translation. And I think neither argument really stands up to any real scrutiny. This is actually a hotly debated set of texts, and the reading that has been presented in this video is like the least likely, the least accepted reading of all the ones that have any kind of currency or circulation within current scholarship. So this is not evidence that I have lied. This content creator is not even providing any evidence for their translation, much less their interpretation of these passages. They're just asserting that this reading is true without even engaging the generations of debate that have taken place regarding what exactly the author of this passage is trying to say. That's not scholarship. That is not critical thinking. That is not even aware of the scholarship. That is just pure dogmatism. This content creator is someone who puts dogma over data and is not even aware that they're doing it. And that's why this content creator was blocked previously, and barring some kind of miracle where they actually demonstrate their ability to think critically and take accountability for their arguments, they're going to be blocked once again. But for the moment, they are unblocked so that they can see this video. And the fit for this video has been Daredevil and the Punisher.